14 commercial vessels turn away from the Red Sea within 72 hours. No shots fired, no official blockade declared, no military confrontation. Technical reasons cited for every diversion: engine trouble, navigation system failures, crew safety concerns. But the pattern is undeniable. The Red Sea is closing, not through war, through invisible pressure. Fuel prices surge 60% in European markets. Insurance underwriters panic. Trade routes that carried 12% of global commerce now carry risk nobody wants to calculate. This is economic strangulation without formal conflict. This is the blockade of the future. Red Sea Doctrine reveals who is behind it and what breaks next. At 06:15 a.m. local time, a Liberian-flagged container vessel reports propulsion issues 40 nautical miles north of Bab el-Mandeb. The ship was fully operational 12 hours earlier. Inspections in Djibouti found no mechanical problems, but now the captain declares he cannot safely continue. The vessel diverts to Aden. Cargo worth $47 million sits in port. Delivery schedules collapse. The shipping company files insurance claims. One ship, technical failure, nothing suspicious, except it is the fourth vessel in 3 days. At 11:30 a.m., a Marshall Islands tanker carrying 2 million barrels of crude oil reports cyber security incident. Navigation systems show false GPS coordinates. AIS transponder malfunctions. The captain cannot verify his position. Maritime law requires he halt transit until systems are restored. The tanker anchors in international waters. Oil futures spike 3.2%. Traders call it market volatility. Red Sea Doctrine calls it coordinated economic warfare. At 14:45 p.m., a Greek bulk carrier receives threatening communications on Maritime VHF radio. Unidentified vessels are operating nearby. Drone activity detected overhead. The shipping company security assessment rates continued transit as high risk. The carrier reverses course. 90,000 tons of grain that was bound for Egypt now heads back toward the Indian Ocean. The vessel will route around Africa. Additional transit time, 18 days. Additional fuel cost, $800,000. But the crew stays safe, and that is what the company tells the media. One straight, 12% of global trade. Would you risk sailing through it? The pattern becomes clear when maritime tracking systems aggregate the data. 14 vessels have diverted, rerouted, or halted in 72 hours. Different flags, different companies, different cargoes, but identical outcome. They stop entering the Red Sea corridor. Satellite imagery shows normal traffic patterns in the Gulf of Aden. Ships queue for Suez Canal transit as usual, but the flow has dropped 23%. That is 212 vessels that should have transited, but did not. Global shipping capacity lost, 1.4 million TEU. Economic impact, incalculable. No government has declared a blockade. No military forces are visibly interdicting traffic. The waterway remains legally open. Freedom of navigation exists in theory, but 14 ships have received the message. The Red Sea carries risks that commercial operators will not accept. When commercial shipping stops moving, the global economy starts breaking. Red Sea Doctrine was created for exactly this scenario, when power is exercised without attribution, when warfare happens below the threshold of formal conflict, when strategic chokepoints close without anyone declaring war. This is not a traditional blockade. This is hybrid maritime warfare. Who controls this sea? A. U.S. and allies. B. Regional powers. C. No one. Maritime insurance syndicates in London convene emergency meetings. Premiums for Red Sea transit increase 78% overnight. Some underwriters refuse to cover the route entirely. Shipping companies must now choose between paying unsustainable insurance costs or routing around Africa. The Cape of Good Hope adds 7,000 nautical miles to the Europe-Asia route. Transit time increases by 3 weeks. Fuel consumption doubles. Operating costs make some routes economically unviable. Maersk announces temporary suspension of Red Sea services. MSC follows within 6 hours. CMA CGM reroutes its entire fleet. These are the 3 largest container shipping companies on Earth. When they stop using a waterway, it means the waterway is effectively closed. No military action required. Just economic calculation, just risk assessment, just the mathematics of global trade deciding the Red Sea is not worth it. Egypt faces immediate crisis. The Suez Canal generates $6 billion in annual revenue. 24,000 vessels transit each year. But if traffic drops 40%, the economic impact cascades through the entire Egyptian economy. Jobs disappear. Government revenue collapses. Political stability becomes questionable. One invisible blockade creates a national emergency. European energy markets react within hours. Natural gas prices increase as LNG shipments are delayed. Oil refineries adjust production schedules to account for longer delivery timelines. Strategic petroleum reserves are tapped to maintain supply. Politicians blame market manipulation. Traders blame geopolitical instability. Sea Doctrine blames whoever is orchestrating the invisible blockade. Because somebody is coordinating this, intelligence assessments begin identifying the pattern. Cyber intrusions targeting ship navigation systems originate from 3 specific server clusters. Threatening radio communications use similar phrasing and linguistic patterns. Drone activity coincides with specific vessel transits. Small boat swarms appear at predictable intervals. This is not random. This is planned. This is a campaign. Naval forces in the region report increased activity from unmarked vessels, fast attack craft without transponders, submarines operating in areas they previously avoided, maritime patrol aircraft from multiple nations conducting unusual flight patterns. Somebody is sending messages to commercial shipping. Somebody wants the Red Sea closed, and they are succeeding without firing a shot. But what happened inside the shipping corridor shocked commanders. A Panamanian-flagged oil tanker proceeds with Red Sea transit despite warnings. Company policy mandates route adherence. Insurance coverage remains valid. The captain believes the threat is exaggerated. At 22:30 p.m. local time, the tanker reports multiple small craft approaching at high speed. No radio contact, no identification. The vessels close to within 500 meters, then withdraw. 30 minutes later, a low-flying drone passes directly over the tanker. The captain requests military escort. No assets are available in the area. The tanker continues alone. At 01:15 a.m., a submarine is detected by passive sonar. Depth 90 meters, range 4,000 meters, tracking the tanker. The captain has no defense against submarine threat. He can only hope it remains unengaged. The submarine maintains position for 40 minutes, then disappears. No attack occurs. No weapons fired. But the message is delivered. We can reach you. We are watching. You are vulnerable. Continue at your own risk. The tanker completes its transit, but the shipping company immediately suspends all Red Sea operations. One successful intimidation creates policy change. Multiply that across the industry, and the blockade is complete. No international law was violated. No act of war occurred. But sea control was exercised through presence and implied threat. This is 21st century naval power. Sea Doctrine tracks how this invisible blockade affects global strategy. U.S. Fifth Fleet maintains presence in the region. Destroyer patrols continue, but American warships cannot escort every commercial vessel. The Navy does not have enough hulls. Even if it did, commercial shipping companies do not want to operate in a war zone. Naval escort implies active combat operations. That means higher insurance, higher risk, higher cost. The economics do not work. European naval forces deploy additional frigates to the Red Sea. Combined maritime forces increase patrol frequency, but presence does not equal security. Commercial shipping requires guaranteed safe passage. One incident and the entire route becomes uninsurable. Regional powers understand this perfectly. They do not need to sink ships. They only need to create uncertainty. Is this the start of a wider naval war? Comment Y or N. The invisible blockade achieves strategic objectives without triggering military response. There is no clear enemy to retaliate against. There is no overt act of war to justify force. There are only 14 ships that chose not to transit. Only economic decisions made by commercial entities. Only insurance assessments and risk calculations. How do you respond militarily to a threat that never materializes into actual violence? Naval strategists call this gray zone warfare. Operations below the threshold of armed conflict. Actions that achieve strategic effects without crossing red lines that would trigger intervention. The Red Sea blockade is textbook gray zone. It threatens commercial shipping without directly attacking it. It raises insurance costs without sinking vessels. It closes a strategic waterway without declaring war. Traditional naval power has no good answer to this approach. You cannot sink what does not attack you. You cannot blockade what is not formally blockading. You cannot deter what operates through proxies and deniable assets. Red Sea Doctrine examines the problem that keeps admirals awake. How do you maintain freedom of navigation when the threat is economic rather than military? Intelligence services work to identify the coordinating authority. Signals intelligence intercepts show patterns. 3 nations have increased maritime communications. Submarine activity correlates with specific political objectives. Drone deployments match known proxy force capabilities, but attribution remains difficult. Deniability is the point. Even if you know who is behind the invisible blockade, proving it requires evidence that can withstand international scrutiny. Without proof, economic warfare continues unopposed. Diplomatic channels activate, backroom negotiations begin. But what leverage exists when no law has been broken? You cannot sanction a country for commercial shipping choosing alternate routes. You cannot impose consequences for insurance companies raising premiums. The invisible blockade operates in the gap between economics and warfare. It exploits the reality that global trade depends on perception of safety. Once that perception breaks, shipping stops. And once shipping stops, everything else follows. 72 hours after the pattern emerges, oil prices have increased 60%. European industrial production faces delays. Asian manufacturers report supply chain disruptions. Egyptian economy enters emergency measures. Global trade recalculates routes and costs, all because 14 ships turned around. Red Sea Doctrine shows you what invisible warfare looks like. No explosions, no casualties, no CNN coverage of burning ships, just quiet economic strangulation, just steady pressure on the chokepoint that connects 3 continents, just the slow realization that sea power in the 21st century is not about who has the most warships. It is about who can make commerce impossible without declaring war. What breaks next? Trade, diplomacy, or deterrence. The invisible blockade will continue until someone finds a counter-strategy, until naval forces develop doctrine for protecting commercial shipping from threats that never materialize, until insurance companies accept risks they currently refuse, until shipping companies choose to operate in waters where 14 others chose not to. That could take weeks, that could take months, that could become permanent. The Red Sea might remain effectively closed, without ever being formally blockaded. This is the future of maritime conflict. This is why Red Sea Doctrine exists, to expose the warfare you do not see, to explain the strategic pressure that operates below headlines, to reveal how chokepoints close and economies break without a single missile launch. Will shipping routes permanently change? Who benefits from the invisible blockade? Can traditional naval power counter economic warfare at sea? The answers will determine whether the Red Sea remains a vital trade route or becomes a monument to outdated concepts of sea control. Subscribe to Red Sea Doctrine, where sea power decides everything.